It might sound crazy, but Zenless Zone Zero should be the new standard of gacha games in terms of storytelling and character writing. This is a bit of a glazing video, and while I know that a lot of you have given up on the game during 1.0, I promise that the game does and has gotten so much better. Before I explain how this game sets a new precedent for all gacha games, I'd like to share my experience on playing the game and how giving it a second chance made it one of my favorite gacha games at this point. I started this game on launch, almost a minute after its release, because I was really excited for the game. I've been following Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero back since the beta, especially since I was facing my own slump in gacha, and I really was interested in the two characters' combat, that being Billy and Miyabi. Billy got benched like beyond repair on day one, and Miyabi wasn't yet out yet, so there was a bit of a wait for me. The funny thing about playing a gacha game at launch is that you're always gonna want to progress quickly to unlock the stamina system and the dailies, but you also want to know what's going on, and I fell into the first category at that point. While the story looked interesting, the characters had established personalities, and there was an ongoing story taking place. Eventually I did end up getting bored about like 2 to 3 weeks in, and I think around the time we had to like chase a train was when I thought that this game was not going to be worth my time, or really anyone else's time. Somehow this wasn't enough to get me to reinstall the game. It actually wasn't until Harumasa was released for free was I motivated to log again. And funny enough, Miyabi was also being released in the same patch, and was running at the same time as him so I could get both of them. I played the game, and I did the main story so I could get her, and I genuinely was surprised at how much better the game had gotten as a whole. A big issue that I initially had about the storytelling in gacha was that the characters were only relevant for the time that they were released. Take basically all of Genshin and Star Rail. I don't know what to tell you. While I didn't see it at the time because it was 1.0, in Zenless Zone Zero, characters kept getting brought back constantly, especially in events, so I wasn't just doing stuff for random NPCs, and a lot of story quests actually revolved around them, rather than the useless NPCs, and many of them had enough personality beyond the default, like, I'm so nice persona. It's actually really funny how Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero came out at a similar time, but I had such polarizing opinions on the games despite both of them being part of the big four. With Wuthering Waves, I remember how excited I was gonna be and just have a great time exploring the game and just seeing what it had to offer. But with Zenless Zone Zero, I was wondering when the game was actually going to start, and I think that's why so many people were not really on board with the game, because of the story and how different it was compared to the other big gacha games at that point. The game is not really that lore heavy, and maybe it is and I'm just silly, but things that take place are relatively casual. Sure, there are stakes and semblances of magic, and that's not an issue, but I find the game shines the most when they go with like a casual approach. For me, I've grown tired of having to follow endless amounts of lore. This Archon controls the wind, this one creates gold, this one actually isn't an Archon, this one does war. With Star Rail, Aeons are often the source of characters' motivations, and it gets boring. If you're not up to date with what the game's lore is, you would see Ting Yun snap her neck and talk about being abundant and destructive. And it's just like, you just snapped your neck. What are you doing? Why are you talking about this stuff? Are you okay? It was almost like there were two levels of understanding that you would need to have in order to enjoy the game. And most of the time in a quest, it's just about how big and crazy the lore is, without giving us like the simple dumbed down explanation of what any of it means. I might just be the issue here, but at some point the dialogue is too much, and I was just waiting for the funny cutscenes. The change of storytelling in Zenless Zone Zero is what made the game so much better for me, especially after I gave it a second chance and let it like update. Instead of characters doing things for holier than thou purposes, they have personal motivations, which is pretty cool. This made a personal connection and a sense of humanity within these characters, which made the games more enjoyable. My favorite story quest so far from this game is the Jane Doe story quest, or special episode. It tells a tale of two playable characters, which is important. It shows the difference between the two and how they take two polar opposites to solve the problems of their crime and the kidnapping. We're able to see how consistent their ideals are at odds, and when they were on opposite sides, they were still able to come to an understanding. It's not like other games where whenever lore is introduced, it puts a stop on the progression, because really players are just left wondering, okay, what does this mean? Why does this matter? Why should I care? And that's what these other games are missing, a sense of realism and really just a grounded approach to the story in general. When all of the competitors of Zenless Zone Zero have a set of systems that alone will guide a character's principles, they feel kind of reduced to just like a fancy model that you could pull based on looks alone. Like, I didn't care for Jane or Seth's model that much, but they had so much more going for them that I ended up liking them and it was cool. I also get it would be fine if the other games had a skip button, but they're always wanting you to do the story, and that's always going to be updated every single patch. They want you to be doing the story, and another little thing that I wanted to touch on about Zenless Zone Zero's story was the fact that the main character's dialogue depends on who you pick. Belle's kind of like a silly and quirky girl, while Wise is like the stoic anime protagonist. Characters will interact with you based on who you pick in the game, and the sibling who wasn't chosen is still relevant, which is unheard of in any other of the main gacha games. I do feel like the Hoyo gacha games have steadily grown into giving the main character more personality, and I like that. I always saw Aether and Lumion as self-inserts, and I do think that worked for Genshin's story because it was kind of like you're in a fantasy land now and that sort of genre. But with Star Rail, Stell and Kalis got more personality with them. They got to say some quirky lines. They also just seemed more responsive to the characters and the world around them. However, Belle and Wise are their own people, and that gives the game much more like silly moments to it because they're able to react to the world around them, and who you pick will actually kind of matter. I really do think they're going in a good direction because Honkai Impact would use characters with their own unique personalities, and while the game did have a lot of lore behind it, there was also a big emphasis on the relationships. Kiana was the main character, and she was basically a happy-go-lucky woman who ended up going through a lot of significant changes as the story progressed. A lot of focus was spent on her relationship with the other characters whose names you might recognize from Star Rail: Bronya, Mei, and Himiko. The game did a great job in balancing people who loved the lore with people who just wanted to casually enjoy the story, and I do think the same is applicable to Zenless Zone Zero. I do think that world building is a huge challenge for live service games like this. Genshin actually did a great job in having both an over-the-top lore explanation for the world, but also a simple task for someone like me, which was just visit the 7 regions and find your twin. The issue I ended up having with Genshin was that it fell flat after kind of losing the plot and knowing that there won't be a resolution for at least another 5 years. But gacha games, again, shouldn't be mindless clicking. Our mouse pads are probably all weeping from all this clicking. This is why that games should be looking at Zenless Zone Zero for reference on what's good to do and what isn't. There are lore reasons for why things are the way they are, but what Zenless Zone Zero does correctly is finding a balance between fantasy and realism in a story. There is still fun in the world, but there's also that humane element of why things are the way they are, creating a sense of realism. And characters also have a balance of lore and just personality for why they do the things they do. I do think that if other games were able to adjust their storytelling to find that same balance, there wouldn't be people like me unable to sit through content that's meant to be exciting. We're meant to look forward to these patches, and I just can't. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you haven't already, give the game a chance. Whether it be a first or second chance, I promise it's gotten better, and have a good day.